All right. Well, welcome everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from today. My name is Amanda Saunders, and Hannah and I are happy that you're here for this first MVAT tool demonstration session. Our session is allocated to last approximately 30 minutes, and I will make sure to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers. Just to go through a couple of housekeeping things. In your GoToWebinar panel, you should have a section marked handouts, and Hannah has attached the PDF of the slides that I will be using in today's presentation. You can click that link and download a copy of the slides for yourself. In the chat window, there's information about how to enter questions into the question panel, and also how to access the polling software that will be used during today's session. Accessed at pollev.com, and the details for joining that polling activity is actually provided in the chat window. So thank you, Hannah, for doing that. There won't be many interactive questions in this session, since the primary focus of today's session will be for demonstration, but I do have two spots that would be great to get some feedback from all of you. So if you have time to join the polling software, that'd be great. All right, so it looks like we have gotten a good number of folks who've joined, and things have kind of slowed down as far as the joining, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So I am Amanda Saunders, based in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am a medical officer with the MSSO, and again, happy to have you here today for this demonstration. The polling software is the Poll Everywhere that I mentioned before. So www.pollev.com, and you'll enter A Saunders MSSO in the username field in the middle, so the white box that you see on the screen. You can join from a smartphone or the computer. You just need a separate browser, and you don't need to enter any kind of user credentials or a username, even if it prompts you to do that. All of your responses are anonymous, so we are not tracking any of that information. A couple of brief introduction slides for you. So MedDRA was developed under the ICH, and the activities of the MSSO are overseen by the ICH. And as such, the ICH owns the copyright for the material that you are going to see today. The information presented here can be used in your own presentation in another place. However, the copyright must be acknowledged, and if you modify the slides in any way, you need to acknowledge that you have modified the slides. I'll be going through a couple of practical examples, because I find that that's the best way to kind of figure out using these tools. So the information that I'm going to give you in the demonstration is there are activities that I've kind of developed on my own, so they are not endorsed by the ICH. So here's our first polling question, and this is something that would be very helpful to understand why you have decided to attend today's webinar. There are many, many of you attending, which is wonderful. So I'd love to understand what motivated you to come to today's tool demonstration. Great. And this is also to make sure that you have successfully connected to the polling software. So that's great to see that that's working as well. All right. Fantastic. So it looks like about half of the audience knows about MVAT, but really doesn't have an awareness of how to use the tool itself. So that's great. I hope that in the end of today's session, you'll have a couple of really useful, practical examples that you can utilize immediately. And then there's a good number of people who use MVAT as well, but they want to learn some additional applications, and then some other folks who are just learning as much as they can about MedDRA and MSSO provided tools. So that's great. Welcome to all of you. So this webinar is the result of feedback received from our MedDRA user community. In the webinars that we conduct on coding and data analytics, we have gotten a lot of feedback through our polling software that lets us know that you as the user community like the demonstrations, the practical examples, and you want more of that. And we were we were looking to figure out which tool to do first, and in the IT survey, it was apparent that almost half of the folks that responded to that survey were not using the MVAT tool. So it's great to get to show you this tool and the power that this tool has, and the features that it offers to you for free. So today we're going to go through how to access MVAT. We're going to go through features of MVAT. I'm going to take you through some practical examples, and then leave a little bit of time at the end for questions and answers. So this is the MVAT tool, the MedDRA version analysis tool. It is a web-based tool that is included in your subscription to MedDRA, which means it's free to all subscribers of MedDRA. As you can see, it looks very similar to other tools that the MSSO offers. When you need to access the tool, you have a couple of options. The first option is to go to our website and select how to use. Scroll down to the tools option and click on that. This will open a screen with a bunch of widgets, and you see the MVAT call out right there. You click on that. That brings you to this page, which talks about versioning. It gives you a screenshot so that you can have some orientation to some of the reports generated by MVAT. And then over here on the right-hand side is a link that says Open MVAT. So you can click away, or you can do what I do and just bookmark it. So this is how you can get to the tool directly, and you can bookmark this. It's in your handouts. And as you can see, you will have to enter your MedDRA ID and password in order to access the tool. Great. So a couple of features of MVAT. As I mentioned, it is ID and password controlled access, but it is free to all subscribers of MedDRA. The user interface and report outputs are available in all MedDRA supported languages, and you also have the ability to run reports on supplemental changes, and that's something that I'm going to demonstrate for you today. There are three functions for MVAT. One is the version report, which produces an exportable report that compares any two versions of MedDRA in their entirety. The second is a data impact report, which will identify changes in a specific set of MedDRA terms or codes that you upload to MVAT. And the third is a search term change function, which will identify changes to a single MedDRA term or code. So what does that mean in practical use? So I've suggested a couple of things that we have demoed in other places and ways that I've used these reports in other roles. So for the version report, a very practical use for this report is making decisions around how to version control your data set. When to upversion your data prior to submission of a CSR, for example, how to allocate enough time and resource to determining impact of a MedDRA version change on data that you have already coded in a previous version. Another practical use is actually viewing supplemental or upcoming changes to MedDRA, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate for you today. The functionality is exactly the same. It's just the comparison of the MedDRA versions is a little bit different. So I'll show you how to do that. Many of you who may be responsible for downloading the files that come out with each release of MedDRA have probably seen the version report included in that file deck. This version report actually will create the same report, but instead of comparing the current release to the new release, it will allow you to decide which versions of MedDRA you want to compare. So you can imagine if you've coded your data in version 19, for example, and you want to understand what's going to happen when you bring it up to version 23.1, you can make a comparison of those two versions instead of having to look at each individual version report that gets released with the release files. The second second function of MVAT that I'm going to demonstrate today is the data impact report. And some practical uses for this report are actually evaluating the impact of those version changes on your data set. So on live data, you could do this with your clinical data set from your clinical trials, PD data that you've extracted from a global safety database. You could use this to look through core safety information or other labeling documents if you are in the process of doing any kind of updates to those and need to look at the impact of MedDRA versioning. And then also tables and listings for study reports or other regulatory documents if you find the need to reversion your information. The last bullet point on this slide is the one that I'm going to demonstrate for you today, and this is the maintenance of custom MedDRA queries. So if you have attended a data analysis course, you've heard us talk about customized MedDRA queries, and I think that this is a good place for users to immediately see impact with using the MVAT to quickly version control any queries that you've created. So without further ado, let's jump into actually seeing how the tool works in these particular examples. So I'm going to switch over to the live MVAT tool. And I, of course, had to log in to get access to the tool. This is the first page that you'll see when you log in for the first time or whenever you log into the MVAT tool. And I want to orient you just quickly to what you see on the screen in front of you. On the right-hand side of the screen, you see information for selecting your preferred language. This is a drop-down menu that allows you to select from any of the MedDRA-supported languages. This will change all of the user interface into the language that you support or that you request. You also have the ability to toggle between the release and supplemental views. I'm going to leave this in release, but I will show you how this works when we do the version report generator. There's a menu here that indicates the different functions that we've talked about. The one that you see on the screen is actually the version report generator. That's the one that you will open straight into. But the first thing I'm going to demonstrate for you is the search term change. So I'm going to click here, and that will open the page to do the search term change function. Again, you can see that you can set your language here. This pull-down menu is actually setting the language for the MedDRA dictionary that you're going to use. I'm leaving it in English for purposes of this demonstration. And then you have the ability to search a term here in this field. So I'm going to search drainage. Simply typing and clicking enter will produce a results queue, if you will, of all of the terms in MedDRA that contain drainage. And you can see there are many, many of them. Well, I'm interested in a term around nasal drainage. So I'm going to come back in and type in nasal drainage. And I do this because I want to demonstrate a little practical pearl, if you will. So now you can see you've returned nothing, but you know that there's a term about nasal drainage because that's what you're interested in looking into. So actually adding a wildcard indicator between the two words will look for any positioning in the MedDRA term itself. So this will kind of give you that, that advantage of not having to know it's the exact order. And then clicking search again. And now you can see it has returned the term that I wanted to show you, nasal sinus drainage. So now, since this only has one term, it's showing you everything at the first retrieval. But if it had multiple, you would click the link that says View Change History, and that would open the bottom part of the screen. And what you're seeing across the bottom is the way that this particular concept has been represented in MedDRA over the course of time. So it was added in version 4.0 as a PT in the respiratory SOC. It was updated to an LLT in version 5. Then it was moved from the respiratory SOC to the surgical and medical procedures SOC in version 5.1 as a PT. And then in version 9 was demoted to an LLT still within that surgical SOC. So this is a very useful way that you can look at information regarding a specific term. I'm going to jump back to the home page by clicking on the right-hand side of the navigational menu. And this brings me back to the version report generator. So the function that I want to show you here is how to actually look into the future. So I'm going to show you how to check for supplemental terms that are coming in the next release of MedDRA. As you know, the maintenance process continues even after the release has occurred. So what I'm going to show you in the supplemental is actually the number of terms and the type of changes that have been made that will be put into version 24. So these are all the things that have been accepted by the MSSO to go into the next release of MedDRA since version 23.1. So I'm going to toggle on the right-hand side and switch this over to my supplemental view. And for those of you who work in our browsers, you know that pink means you're now in the supplemental. You can see that their other options have now been kind of hard-coded, if you will, to take me to the supplemental version. I can't change to any other version here. I also have the ability to limit my search to a specific SOC if that's what I'm interested in. So if I were interested in a number, what changes are coming to the immune SOC, for example, I could simply click on immune system disorder and run the version report. And this would give me only those changes that have been accepted that are within the immune systems disorder SOC. From this view, you also have the ability to select secondary SOC information. So you can tick the box that will then give you any information around changes to secondary SOC. For purposes of this demonstration, I'm not going to do that. Once you've made your selection, you click Run Version Report. And this is going to begin the process of finding all of the changes between the current release and the supplemental version. In the interest of time, I've already run this report and pulled it up on the screen in front of you. So the report will actually generate a summary page, which I'll go back to after we look at this report, but it will also allow you to export the report into an Excel workbook. The summary page of the workbook explains what all of the other reports are, and all the tabs across the bottom correspond to the columns that are the reports that are listed here. This gives you a very easy way to manipulate the information that doesn't rely on an internet browser. However, the internet browser, once the search has completed, will give you the same information that you can interact with directly on the screen. The hyperlink view detail will give you the information about the terms that have been identified. So for example, for report number 10, new LLTs, including new PTs, there have been 371 new terms added since version 23.1 was released. And by clicking on View Detail, all of the information regarding all of these terms that have been added will be presented to you on the right-hand side of the screen. We'll give you all the information about the hierarchy that they have been assigned for their primary SOC. The same is true of the new PT report. And then in the promotions and the demotions and some of the other change reports, what you will actually see looks a little bit different. So I want to show you an example of that. So when you look at a change type report, a term that existed in version 23.1, but something has changed with regard to the hierarchy for that term in the supplemental release or the supplemental view, you'll actually see two sets of information. So you'll see the term that you're interested in, but you'll see where it lives in 23.1 for a promoted LLT, because now we're taking the LLT from this PT in version 23.1 to its own preferred term in the supplemental, which would be what's anticipated for version 24. The same is true for demotions. So this preferred term in version 23.1 will now be demoted under the preferred term in vascular graft occlusion in version 24. You'll see things like the changes that get made to primary SOC allocation, for example. You can see how the terms have been maintained or have been changed since the release. Again, to pull this out as a spreadsheet, you just click the button at the top in this pink box that says Export Selections to Spreadsheet. Since I have all buttons ticked, my report will contain all of the reports that are indicated here. And if you forget all of this information that I just gave you, you can click on the version report explanation and very quickly get succinct information about what is contained in each of the reports listed in the summary. This will tell you how to interpret the information that is presented in those reports. All right. So now we're going to jump to the last function that I want to show you, and this is the data impact report. And this is one that I think many of you will be able to start using immediately. So the data impact report looks very similar to our version report generator. Again, we can select our user interface language, we can select our MedDRA language, and we can pick our starting and ending version. A couple of things to note here. Your ending version obviously needs to be later than your starting version, and you will get an error message if you get that mixed up. But this is a great way for you to version control your own data. So I'm going to pretend, for purposes of this demonstration, that I have an amazing query that I've created when I was in version 19, working in clinical development with my product. And now the product is available on the market, and MedDRA is now 23.1, and I need to use my same query that I used during clinical development in the routine monitoring for my product. But I need to reversion my query. I took the data analysis course, and I know that versioning is very important, so I need to do that. So what I can do here is simply select version 19.0. I'm going to version 23.1, click Next. This is where you're going to have to import your data. So a couple of points about this. The data has to be in a specified Microsoft Excel format, and the columns have to be laid out exactly this way. So what you need to do is set your file up so that it looks exactly like this. The row ID column can be blank. Your preferred term LLT needs to be in the second column, and then the code column is the third column. You would need to extract this information from whatever file you're using. In my case, I have a query, so it's really simple because I just have the term and then the code. So I just add a blank column on the left-hand side, and I'm ready to go. The maximum number of records here is 100,000. That's restricted by Excel, of course. And then once your data has been run through the process and validated, and then a report is generated, it's important that you know that we do not continue to keep the information that you have uploaded. That information is now gone, that data is gone. So if you were to need to rerun the report, you're going to have to upload again. So I'm going to click Choose File and see where my pop-up window jumps up. Yep. Okay, good. So here's my custom query that I created that I just think is fantastic, and I need to reversion. And I'm going to click Next. You can see that the file has been identified here. Click Next, and this is going to import the file. And in doing this, it's also validating the information to make sure that I am, in fact, recognizing the right starting version of MedDRA, and that I have formatted those columns correctly. You can see it runs very quickly. I had 279 rows in my query, and it processed all 279 rows. And what it's letting me know at the bottom, similar to the version report generator, it's letting me know where the differences are between the two versions of MedDRA that I have identified. So this column actually identifies those, the column entitled Total Unique Terms Between Selected Versions is giving me the information comparing version 19 to version 23.1. So between those two versions of MedDRA, 201 terms were promoted. In my data that I uploaded, that impacted none of my actual terms. So that's what this impact on uploaded data column tells you. Not just what's different between the two versions, but how that actually changed the query that you created. All right, so when we click on the details here, it's going to look very similar to the version report generator. It gives you what happened between the two versions of MedDRA. So in version 19, a term was demoted. under another PT in version 23.1. And you can just go down the line and see all the different things that have changed. There's a primary SOC allocation that changed. So what does this mean? Well, the deal with this is that you have to remember it's not recoding anything. So it's not recoding your data. It's telling you where you're going to need to focus your recoding efforts. So in my query, I would then need to, let me grab it and show you. So what that means is that in order for me to utilize my custom query, I'm going to need to go in my query using the report that I generated and see that where it says hepatic congestion at the PT level, I need to replace that term with congestive hepatopathy. So I would need to then come in and do that in my query. So it's important that you remember that you're not recoding anything. So you're not actually changing any of the data that you coded. You're simply pointing out the differences between the two. All right. So yeah, a couple of things that you can do with the MVAT tool. We have about 5 minutes left, and I want to make sure I leave time for questions. So Hannah, are there any questions that have come through?
Yes, our first question is, can I use HLTs or HLGTs in the data impact report?
So the formatting for loading it has to be preferred term or LLT. So that's the level that you have to use for bringing the data in for doing the data impact report.
Great. Our next question is, can you please speak to the use of the comprehensive LLT changes report in the data impact report? When I've reviewed this report on my data, it seems to identify changes that are not relevant to my actual data.
Okay. All right. Well, that might just be a matter of what you're importing and how many versions you're jumping, if you will. So let me pull an example back up. I don't want to run it again, so let me grab it out of a folder that I saved here. All right, so the report that's being discussed is the comprehensive sorry, this is the version report generator. My apologies. Let me run it again, and then we can pull it up on the screen. So as you can see, it didn't save my file, so I need to go back here and pull my file up. And it'll just take a second to run it. Are there other questions, Hannah, while I'm gearing this one up?
Yes, we have one that asks, do we need to always include a column for code in the Excel file to upload in the MVAT tool, or can I just fill in the column with the PT?
So according to what it says, that it should require a code. However, I have found that you do not have to have the code actually in that space. You just can't have anything else in that column. So that column has to be empty. But you can use the hierarchy analysis tool in the browser to generate the codes so that you can fill that column with the codes. But no, it will work with just the PT LLT in that second column as long as your third column is empty. So yeah, good question. All right, so we are looking at the comprehensive LLT changes. So this is actually looking at all of the ways that the information has shifted from the two versions that you're comparing against your actual data. So for example, you will see that there are a variety of terms that are listed in my query, these LLTs, that were under one PT in version 19 and have now been moved to a different PT in version 23.1. So you can see that it's giving me, it's basically adding together information from other reports to give me that information on one screen. But if you need additional help with that, you can click on the report impact explanation at the top. And this is actually going to let you know what that specific report is telling you. And this will actually let you know how you need to action those things. So I hope that answers the question. It's probably just a more of a matter of the data that you're running isn't impacted in that particular way for that report, as opposed to you know, any other issue with the running of the report. Any other questions, Hannah?
Our next question is, for the data impact report, will there be an option to add the verbatim term to the import file so we can see new direct hits when up-versioning?
So it's my understanding that that is a feature that is coming in future iterations, but at this time that is not an option.
Okay, and then we just had a new one come in. In the example you just showed, it said 10 changes, but the details showed more than 10.
Yeah, so that's a little bit tricky. So because they're looking at multiple hits on the same PT, you have to consider that some of these are additional. So it's not as straightforward as one-to-one. So that is a little bit tricky.
All right, our next question asks, when searching for a single term, why do you only receive results for a PT when the same search term is also an LLT?
So what? Okay, so run that by me again.
When searching for a single term, why do you only receive results for a PT when the same search term is also an LLT?
So I'm not sure that I follow the question on that one. So you're actually not restricted to LLT or PT. So for example, what you're doing is you're searching for the occurrence of this term. So you can see that it was a preferred term. It then became an LLT. It went back to being a preferred term, and now it's an LLT. So it is actually both. So I'm not quite sure. Not quite sure about that. But if that didn't address it, then maybe send us an email to the help desk and we can further that explanation.
Our next question is, should blank rows be removed before the impact analysis? Will it affect the analysis?
Yeah, so you should remove blank rows, absolutely. And you should, thank you for asking that question, because you should also remove duplicated rows. So if you have, for example, if you have multiple things that you've put together, if a term exists multiple times in your source that you're going to be uploading to the MVAT tool, it will actually produce multiple rows in the impact report as well. So then that will give you an artificial number that is difficult to understand. But so yeah, it's important that you deduplicate and that you remove any blank rows.
Our next question is, can we upload MVAT into a vendor software?
Now, I do not know the answer to that question. So I will, if you will, Hannah, you have contact details for that person. We can get back to you by email on that one.
Great. And we only have one question left at the moment, and it asks, why do the reports have some of the lines highlighted?
Just to group them. So that actually is a trigger to you to let you know that those are potentially relating to the same term. So it's important that that's kind of a way to help your brain understand that those are actually terms that relate to one another. So it's just a nice way to break that screen up so it's not all looking like they're all individual terms. So it's really a formatting thing to trigger that. Yeah, great. All right, so we have gone a little bit over our time, but I hope that in this demonstration, even though brief as it was, you found the ability to access the tool, you kind of understand what the purpose of the tool is, and hopefully in these demonstrations you've identified a way that you can use MVAT in your daily activities to help with your work, and also if you are using MVAT, you've seen something that maybe you didn't know before. The last thing here is just to do a feedback survey for us, if you don't mind. It shouldn't take you very long. There are only a few questions. They all appear at once. So I hope that you will take a moment to do that feedback. This actual 30-minute demonstration session is the result of your feedback. So we do listen, we do respond. So please take the time to do that for us. It would be extremely helpful. And again, I cannot thank you enough for taking the time to attend today. We we blew through it. It just took, it's just a lot of great information here, and hopefully you found some useful pearls. Again, we can be reached at the email, the mssohelp@meddra.org, or if you go to our website, we now have a chat function available where you can connect with one of our help desk folks directly through the chat. We also do lots of posting on social media now, so please follow us on social media to keep up to date with all of the happenings of the MSSO and all of the things related to MedDRA. The links to the tools that we discussed today and some of the other tools available are also provided in the slides that you were given. Again, if you joined us late, the handout is attached to the webinar interface. So if you click on that link, it will give you the slides so that you can download those and have those. Hannah, anything else? Or
we have one last question if we have time for
okay.
it. Is it possible?
I'm happy to answer it, yeah.
Okay. Is it possible to find out if there are new PTs after a version update in e.g. in an HLT group with the listing which only contains PT terms?
Can you ask that question again? I'm sorry.
Is it possible to find out if there are new PTs after a version update in e.g. a HLT group with the listing which only contains PT terms?
An impact. Okay, so I think if I understand the question correctly, you're asking about looking at changes to the higher level hierarchy beyond the preferred term from one version to another. And the answer to that question is yes. So I can use this spreadsheet to show you that. So this is actually the supplemental one that we ran on the version generator. So you can actually see changes in the hierarchy represented here. So if you look, for example, an LLT that gets moved from one preferred term to another, and then if you take this information and then you run it back through the hierarchy analysis tool in the browser, you would be able to see all the comprehensive information regarding the new hierarchy. If the term actually moves from one SOC to another, you can see that in the primary SOC change report. And again, you can do the same thing by running the report back through the hierarchy analysis tool in the browser. You can get the comprehensive hierarchy for the new placement of the term. And then also the tick box that I was talking about, you may have a need in specific situations to select the include secondary SOC information, and that will give you all of the additional links for a particular term, not just the primary link. So it might be that in your particular situation, you need to understand all of the other changes as well. So you would need to just click that include secondary SOC information tick box. And then, you could also, if you're worried about just the volume of information coming at you, you could just select the particular SOC that you might be interested in for the more granular look. I hope that answers the question. If not, please just send us an email or get us on the chat, and we'll try to work through that more specifically with you. All right, Hannah, anything else that's coming through?
We have a question that says, what's the best approach to find out if, I think this is the typo, if PTs can be coded to a new LLT, if VTs can be coded to a new LLT?
Verbatim. So, yeah, so that's a big question, and I don't know the answer to it for purposes of this demonstration with this tool. There is a best practices guide on the MedDRA.org website under support documentation, and that best practices guide is phenomenal for providing multiple approaches to versioning your data. And it gives some very specific examples about how data should be evaluated for recoding or reversioning, and some of the considerations and ramifications of those decisions. So I would encourage you, if you have specific questions around versioning beyond just using the tool, to go ahead and look at that best practices document. It will offer you many different options and different approaches that have been used. So All right, well, we are 10 minutes over. I want to thank everyone for joining and thank you for hanging out beyond the time. Please do fill out that survey. It will be active for 24 hours, but it should not take you more than 5 minutes. So if you have it up, if you can just go ahead and complete it, that would be great. And we look forward to seeing you or having you in another one of our webinars in the future. So thank you very much.